Okay, so this is an outlook on war games. This will be a collection of topics and short commentary. Let me start with the topic is Special Operations Forces and Contemporary Combat and War Games. Recently, this is several weeks ago, I was at a bookstore, saw a wargaming magazine on the shelf. I can't remember the name of the magazine. I know it's a European publication in English, though, and it is. I should clarify, it's a miniatures wargaming magazine. One of these high gloss magazines. I definitely at least skim every edition that I come across. But anyways, I was especially enticed when I saw it on the shelf because it had, clearly across the top of the cover, the banner that the focus was on modern combat or contemporary combat in war games. And I thought, perfect. A topic that I'm deeply interested in, and very interested to read this magazine. So I got all the way through the magazine, read some articles, skimmed the rest, and perhaps I should not have been surprised that I was very disappointed about something. But again, perhaps I should not have been surprised. So the magazine that was supposed to focus on modern combat in war games was probably 80% special operations forces in special operations in different theaters. But what I'm getting at, and what I see too often, is this unwarranted equation between special operations forces and contemporary warfare or contemporary combat. I would prefer to simply see, instead of advertising on a cover, that your focus topic is modern combat or contemporary combat. Just be more accurate and say your focus is special operations forces and special operations in wargaming. That would be fine. I probably wouldn't even bother to pick it up in that case. Anyways, I can talk another time about my ideas about special operations forces. I won't do that now because that wasn't the topic I was going to talk about. I was literally talking about picking up a wargaming magazine and seeing yet again a completely unwarranted equation of special operations forces and special operations with contemporary combat. That's this topic. But I am, I don't categorically define myself. I don't take it lightly to categorically define myself in any particular way. But when it comes to special operations forces, I am a huge skeptic, and this is not an abstract concept or topic. Okay, it's not an abstract. That's not an abstract statement. Okay, it's based on my experiences I can talk about when relevant. As a matter of fact, I am going to mention one in passing, but I will elaborate when it's relevant. And if I can be fairly sure that any topic will come up again, it'll be this, because if anything, my experiences in this area could at least come through in whatever more design work I do with Troops in Contact. Okay, I'm a huge skeptic of Special Operations Forces, so that means I look on with bewildered amusement at the American public's near infatuation with Delta Force, Navy SEALs, and anything else that remotely looks like super soldiers. You don't win wars. You do not win wars with Special Operations Forces. I guess that is one root of my skepticism. I'm a Special Operations skeptic. They're a great force enabler, and that's about it. Now, my ideas are also influenced by personal experience, and I'll mention one, although there are definitely more. But so when I was in Iraq as a grunt, not that I like that term, but I don't know, it's a pretty evocative term in anyways. So as an infantryman in the 1st Infantry Division in Iraq in 2004 in Samarra, our local Special Operations safe house was overrun. It was overrun by Iraqi insurgents. And to make a long story short, we, the regular General Purpose Forces, GPF, had to go save their sad souls. So that's a good thumbnail sketch of where I come when we're going to talk about Special Operations Forces in contemporary combat. It's not Hollywood for me. Let's just put it that way. All right. So next topic. Referring back to the tinkering and experimentation I've done with TIC, Troops in Contact, a small unit combat action game, simulation game from the recent past to the near future. The idea of an open-ended action environment, This is purely speculative. I don't actually know how this might be done, but it's intriguing nonetheless. I was reading about a hugely popular and successful online game, I guess you'd call it. I know nothing about it. As a matter of fact, I went out of my way to go find out what the deal was with this game, because it's so popular. It's part of it has seeped into popular culture. So in reading about the history of the development of this game, it was actually kind of fascinating to see how the early designers and developers had this concept of this open-ended full environment for a game. So anyways, the idea, to take that back to TIC, it would be very interesting to completely, and again, it's purely speculative, but maybe break completely away from the whole scenario concept. So a scenario simply being a completely self-contained environment, that you have a specific starting point, and you have if you don't have an end point, at least you have an end line. But maybe going beyond that and having, again, a kind of open-ended action environment. Maybe the idea is the game, the simulation game that you get, it has something like a playbook. Not a playbook like GMT has, but a playbook that defines a reality, basically, a setting and everything. And instead of scenarios, maybe there are multiple. I mean, maybe you have a playbook of maybe 20 pages, and in that you have maybe like 25 different defined like entry points. So you can enter the action at a particular point, and you can exit the action at any particular point. So that would be open-ended, maybe. Now there would still be like this game, this online game that I was reading about. You would still have things to achieve. You would still have success or failure, but it would be in an open-ended kind of action environment concept. So again, just speculative. I might come back and take another look at that at some point in the future. All right, so topic 3. This is a fairly big one for me. I've talked about it numerous times. The concept of unit breaking, and specifically here, unit breaking in a Napoleonic battle. Okay. First of all, as I've said in another video, my starting point, based on experience, among other things, units don't break in combat. Now, I explained this another time. I'm talking about, first of all, I made very clear that I was talking about small units and in combat actions, and maybe reading on different forums, especially the miniatures page. I was reflecting recently that maybe I'm not making that clear enough. In other words, maybe it's perfectly valid that maybe for another person, small unit is a battalion. Understand that to me, a battalion is kind of a very large thing. Having been in a battalion, having been a key leader in a battalion, infantry battalion, having deployed in several battalions. Battalion is in no way, in my mind, a small unit. It's not a small thing. It's not a small unit. But I can understand how another person might think, well, compared to an army, a battalion is a small. Yeah, compared to an army, a battalion is certainly a small thing. Certainly a small unit. But that's not what I meant. I'm talking about small units where, basically, a small unit is where, I guess one way to put it is every member of that unit can have a fairly direct and fairly direct relationship with every other member of that team or unit. So we're talking teams and squads. Even platoon is not transitory. Is borderline. A platoon, I guess, to me, has some small unit aspects and some larger unit aspects. Okay, but I'm talking about small units, combat actions. Okay, now the reason why I'm bringing this up again is because I was, definitely doing some reading on TMP recently, and there was intense discussion about Napoleonic battle, how units responded to different things on the battlefield. And one poster gave a fairly lengthy, but very well, very, very, very intense, I guess, narrative. Well, it was a narrative, but recounting what he had read in some historical account. Okay, I got it. War gamers read military history. And the experience, you could say, related here was, if you can imagine, a unit, I don't know what the unit was, but you have a unit and a bunch of soldiers, and they're standing in the open. They're in formation. They're standing there in formation, and the battle's underway. Okay, the battle is underway, but from their perspective, the battle is underway, but they're not hearing or seeing anything. They might as well be standing in a park, waiting to have a picnic. Of course, they're not. It's the mental, it's the knowledge, the knowing that you're part of a battle. It's fairly significant, by the way. So you're there, but you're still not experiencing anything directly. You're not experiencing fear. I mean, it would be disingenuous to believe that all these soldiers lined up in these long lines are like the whole overwrought stuff about fear and whatever. It's not that yet. You're there. You're in your formation. Okay. Again, I'm not there. I'm not talking first person. What I am doing though is I am constantly trying to draw what parallels I can between my firsthand experience as an infantryman and the experience of these infantrymen lined up in a formation 200 years ago. Okay. So they're there, and they're not seeing or hearing anything. And then there's somebody hears for the first time in that unit a sound, and I imagine it probably could have been like a bit, a fairly dramatic moment in time. Okay, boom. It wasn't necessarily a boom, but I mean, okay, the enemy's out there. It's like the first concrete evidence, okay, that the enemy's out there. And then there are the sounds, right? And the sounds are getting closer. This is what is related in this long post, in this long discussion about again, unit behavior in battle, okay? So the sounds and the enemy's getting closer. And this account goes right through, right? The enemy finally becomes visible, and the army's advancing, and then the cannon fire starts, and then the charge of cavalry, and the unit that we're talking about here breaks and runs. Okay. By the way, I'm not saying that they broke and ran. I'm saying in the account they broke and ran. And so when somebody hears what I have to say about this whole breaking in combat, somebody might say, well, isn't that, well, first of all, isn't that breaking in combat? And what do you call that? And I think about this. There is first of all, there's a scaling issue, and then there's basically human perception and human recollection. I'll take the second one first. It's without going into any. I'm not going to go into any details here now. It's not that unheard of. Okay, the human mind is going to. Well, first of all, we as humans, we don't experience the world like a video camera. We don't remember things like a video recording. We interpret everything. And so if you were part of a unit that behaved in a certain way under stress, combat, whatever you want to call it, there's going to be a lot of human attempts to understand what happened and why. And so what I'm getting at is that if you were part of a unit that, let's say, fell back, whatever that means in particular, but if you were part of a unit that fell back under enemy action, there may be a human tendency to think that the force you felt against you was overwhelming. It was overwhelming. It was crushing. It was whatever. And there are going to be attempts, again, to understand one's own behavior, let alone understand what others were doing against you at that time. And so so what I'm getting at is, let's just imagine that an enemy force, let's go back to our example there, the narrative of this Napoleonic battle. The enemy is coming across the field. There's firing, there's the din of battle and all that. And let's just say, the bayonets are drawn with the enemy coming across towards your unit. If the unit you're part of, let's just say, for whatever reason, turns and ran to a wood line, a couple hundred meters behind, just ahead of the enemy. So let's just say that in reality we know there were essentially no casualties, maybe a few, I don't know. But let's just say that's what happened. Like the unit turned, ran to a wood line, basically still essentially stayed together, not necessarily very organized, but the group as a whole essentially stayed together. And the enemy, then this happened when the enemy was, let's say, 20 paces away and closing. Now, one might remember that as enemy action. One might talk about fear, terror. One might talk about breaking. And it might even be recalled that way because you don't want to recall that you were a coward. We're talking about cowardice. I'm not saying that it is cowardice. That's not what I'm saying. I'm actually going to get to something else. But I'm saying one might think of it as cowardice, in which case one thing soldiers do not do is they do not admit to cowardice. That's pretty much a blanket statement. So one's going to find other explanations. Okay, but let's get to what's important. Cowardice isn't important. Fear isn't even important. What's more important is if this happens. So now I'm using my example. What it is it's self-preservation. It's self-preservation, and if one soldier breaks and turns and runs, then there's that pressure for it to have a rippling effect. But it's self-preservation. There was no loss of control. See, this is what I'm getting at. If a unit is acting on self-preservation, it's not it's not a complete loss of control. Maybe it absolutely may be a loss of control for the officers or leaders that are trying to stop some behavior. Yeah, obviously, but if the officers and leaders are part of that, you're not going to hear about loss of control. Self-preservation, the behavior of a unit in combat, under fire, whatever, just thinking about self-preservation, that has nothing to do with this fear, terror, breaking, whatever. Okay. Anyways, I'm being speculative. Yes. I'm being speculative. Well, I'm being speculative, but hey, I'm a skeptic. I'm very, very skeptical about quote unquote historical accounts because of the human factor, because of the human psychology involved. It's just the way it is. Let me recount a story that has to do with human psychology and why I'm just simply extremely skeptical. And yes, I am saying if I hear somebody recount some military history that they've read about a Napoleonic battle, I'm automatically skeptical about the origins of this whole account. It's just the way it is. Let me tell you, relate a story that had a huge impact on me, and basically I remember to this day. When I was a platoon leader, training up in Germany, Bradley platoon leader, training up in Germany, we were at the Maneuver Training Center, and we were going against the OPFOR, and we were outfitted with all of the lasers and sensors that go along with, Army maneuver training. So all of these lasers and sensors allow us to, adjudicate kills and all this stuff, right? We have them for the vehicles, we have them for our personal weapons, we have them on our body. That's all fine, right? That helps increase it helps increase realism in the training, but that's not the point. The point is, I was surprised and actually taken aback when the maneuver was over for my platoon, and we all dismounted and walked up this hill to a large tent where we were going to have a large formal AAR, after action review. And we stepped inside that tent, a large tent with rows of folding chairs, and the entire platoon sat down. And I was expecting an AAR, as I understood it, which was great. But there was an added piece that, again, hadn't even dawned on me. What happened was what happened was, in addition to all the lasers and sensors that I knew we would be discussing, again, I just hadn't thought that inside all the lasers and sensors, the trainers, right, the observer trainers were able to record every one of our movements and a few other things. But so what happened was, for the AAR, kind of the centerpiece of the AAR was a huge screen, a flat screen at the front of the tent, and they replayed these key actions during the maneuver exercise. And it was a computer screen. It had the terrain, and it had every single one of my soldiers. And it was like a high-end, video war game. And you could see every individual soldier moving. You could see engagements. They had, the colored lines as shots were fired back and forth. And the point was, you could see, and this is how we facilitated discussion. You could talk about fields of fire. You could talk about masking your own fires. You could talk about formations. So the point was, and the lesson that was driven home that day was, wow, we as humans, we remember things so in such a faulty manner. It's hard to believe. But when soldiers believe that they're in perfect formation, when soldiers believe that they saw exactly what they saw, and they did exactly even soldiers recalling that they did something, and it turns out they didn't do it at all. It has nothing to do with lying. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the weird world of human perception, understanding, and making sense of the world. And it was seeing what actually happened. And all I'm going to say is that you could have interviewed every single last soldier hours and hours and hours on end. And I'm saying that you put it all together, you never would have gotten a whole narrative that matched what actually happened on the ground. And it was only the sensors that gave you an indication of what actually happened. Both good and bad. Not that it's an issue of good or bad, but I mean, the recording of what happened showed, well, actually there's a wargaming idea here. What actually happened, despite what people recalled happened, showed, kind of brilliant actions, and then incredibly, basically moronic actions. Like, you're looking at this unit on the screen, and you're like, wow, these guys are the Keystone Cops. But over here you have this, wow, these soldiers moved and acted in a way that was like, it was brilliant, So you have a mixture of this, and again, it's kind of the mixture of the whole that creates the overall outcome, right? All right. There's the other scaling thing. What I mean by that is, if I'm a soldier standing in a formation, go back to our Napoleonic battle. If I'm a soldier standing in a formation of, several hundred, and we're not that far away from another formation of several hundred, and another formation of several hundred, and my musket that I'm holding can only kill an enemy reliably out 100 paces. For me, small unit combat action is really, really small. I mean, basically it's a 100-meter radius around me. So being in a formation on a long line, on a battlefield is not, and there are enemy lines coming, artillery firing, horses, charging around the battlefield. This is not, again, that's not small unit action for me. Small unit action becomes kind of the whites of the eyes of the opposite soldier and soldiers. Anyways, I can talk about that again another time. But I was thinking that, reading about this breaking, quote unquote, in a Napoleonic battle helped clarify for me again the ideas of unit breaking at small unit combat action level. Next topic is a bit about simulation and representation. This is not it's not earth-shattering to say that a simulation does not have to be a facsimile. That should be self-evident, and yet we still have, creeping into our wargame discussions over and over again, at least very different ideas of what simulation means. The idea I had recently is, let's talk about a robotic dog. Okay, a robotic dog. Let's imagine the first robotic dog that was completed at some point. I don't know when. At some point, some design team debuted the first robotic dog. If you can imagine, it probably didn't look like a dog at all. It probably had kind of 4 legs, 4 appendages. It probably made some sounds. But anyways, the point is that what's even involved in making a robotic dog or a simulated dog? What should it do? What should a simulated dog do? What makes it a simulated dog? Well, what makes a dog? You have to talk about, again, what makes a dog. What aspects do you want to simulate that together make your creation, your simulation, a dog? But the point being that the first simulated dog would not be a facsimile of a dog, and in any case, it wouldn't be a dog. But if it's representational, if it's enough of a representation of what makes a dog, then it will succeed as a simulated dog. Okay, so in war games, not a facsimile at all. has nothing to do with cleaning weapons, getting dirty, sleeping in a mud pit. Yeah, that's not that is not part and parcel of a simulation of war or combat. Okay. I'm going to wrap this up with just one more topic. I'm not even going to. This is only going to be a mere suggestion right now. I know I'm going to have to come back to this with a lot more detail after I've done a lot more reflection. But some recent reading has really driven home yet again some generational, quote unquote, generational differences in perspectives on OEF and OIF, Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom. Okay, let me put it as succinctly as possible. There are some key differences in perspective about what the conflict was about, what the nature of the conflict was, what needed to be done, what didn't need to be done. There are some fairly significant, I think, differences in perspective. So let's just take OIF for an example, Operation Iraqi Freedom. There are some significant differences in perspective depending on whether a person's experiences during OIF were as a general officer, as a senior field officer, or a junior officer, or, of course, senior enlisted, mid-grade enlisted, or lower enlisted. And of course, you have in there, of course, you're going to have some past experience differences with those different groups, let alone age differences. But I think there are some pretty significant differences that are worth exploring. Yeah.